When an avoidant finally utters the words, "I'm sorry," you have to understand the magnitude of what just happened. For most people, an apology might seem simple. It's a release of guilt, a bridge to repair a relationship, a common act of humility. But for the avoidant, it's an entirely different terrain. Their entire nervous system has been built around the idea of survival through distance. Vulnerability for them has been coded as danger. So when they reach the point of expressing regret, when they actually cross the threshold and admit wrongdoing, it is not just a sentence. It is a crack in the armor they've been wearing their entire lives. Think about that for a moment. Their entire pattern, the way they've learned to exist in relationships, is to withdraw, to protect, to shield themselves from exposure. So that apology is not merely about you or even about the situation. It is an internal battle that they've decided, even briefly, to stop fighting. It's the moment they stop defending and start surrendering to the reality that connection matters more than control. That is rare. That is significant. And if you can see it for what it is, you'll recognize the tremendous courage behind words that might otherwise sound ordinary. Now, does that mean their apology will always sound eloquent? Not at all. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. Their sorry may feel awkward, rush it, or incomplete. You might even be tempted to dismiss it because it doesn't carry the emotional intensity you'd expect. But here's the truth: the weight of their apology is not in its presentation, it's in its existence. You're witnessing someone who has been terrified of intimacy step into the very space they've avoided for so long. That is like watching a runner who has trained their whole life to sprint suddenly try to swim. The form isn't perfect, but the effort is extraordinary. And let's be real, an avoidant doesn't get there without pressure. It often takes repeated moments of reflection, moments where they begin to sense the cost of their silence, their distance, their defensiveness. The apology is a culmination of those silent realizations, the times they went home and replayed the fight in their head, the moments they recognized that maybe this time they went too far. What seems casual in delivery is often monumental in process. So when you hear those words, pause. Take in the gravity of what just happened. Because whether they know it or not, they've just taken a step toward rewriting their story. They've shown you and themselves that they are capable of lowering the drawbridge. And that's not just about them admitting a mistake. It's about them admitting, I value this connection enough to risk my greatest fear. The rarity of that moment should remind you of something profound: human beings are not static. Even those who have armored themselves in avoidance for decades are not beyond change. That, I'm sorry, is proof. Proof that no matter how deep the pattern, no matter how ingrained the fear, the human heart still craves connection enough to risk the discomfort of vulnerability. And here's the key: it may not come often, it may not look polished, but when it does, it means something. It means the wall has been touched. It means the fortress is not impenetrable. It means, at least for that moment, love, care, or respect won out over fear. And if you've ever wondered whether an avoidant is capable of truly stepping forward, their apology is the clearest signal that yes, they can. So don't minimize it. Don't rush past it. Recognize it as the profound shift it truly is. Because the day an avoidant says, I'm sorry, is the day you see their humanity breaking through their defenses. And in that moment, you are not just hearing words. You are witnessing transformation in real time. And if you can see the rarity of that gift, you'll never hear those words the same way again. When an avoidant finally says the words, I'm sorry, the first thing we have to understand is this: what they're saying and what they're communicating may not always look the same. You might expect this flood of vulnerability, this cinematic confession, something that feels like a tidal wave of emotion. But for the avoidant, that's not how it usually comes out. Their apology might sound understated, almost casual, sometimes even vague. They may stumble, they may minimize, they may say it in a way that doesn't quite match the depth of what you feel the moment deserves. And yet, beneath that surface, something much deeper is happening. You see, avoidants live in a world where exposure equals danger. For them, emotional closeness often feels threatening, as if opening up could cost them their sense of safety. So when they offer an apology, it's not just a statement, it's an internal shift. It's their nervous system choosing, even if briefly, to step away from avoidance and step into intimacy. They may not have the words to fully capture it, but the act itself is a signal. It's saying, I know I hurt you, and despite my instinct to run, I'm choosing to bridge this gap. That's why it's critical to look beyond the packaging. Don't get hung up on whether it sounds poetic or perfectly timed. The true meaning lies in the courage it took to speak it at all. It's an acknowledgement, not just of what happened, but of your importance to them. And make no mistake, when an avoidant apologizes, it is rarely about obligation, it is about recognition. Recognition that the connection matters enough to risk discomfort. Now, does that mean every apology is flawless? Of course not. Sometimes their words will fall short. Sometimes their body language won't match the weight of what they're trying to express. But if you only judge it at the surface level, you'll miss the significance. Because for an avoidant, saying, I'm sorry is not only about mending the external relationship, it's about confronting their own inner resistance. It's about facing the fear that has kept them safe but also kept them distant. And that confrontation is enormous. Think of it this way: when someone who has always been guarded lets even a little vulnerability slip through, it's like finding water in the desert. It might not be a waterfall, but it's proof that life exists where you thought it couldn't. That tiny stream of vulnerability is a sign of growth, a sign of possibility. It may not be everything you hope for, but it's real. And often real is better than perfect. The meaning of their apology also lies in its direction. An avoidant who apologizes is not just acknowledging the past, they are signaling a potential for the future. They're saying, I see what I did and I'm willing to step outside my usual pattern. That willingness, even if fragile, is a seed of transformation. It doesn't guarantee everything changes overnight. It doesn't mean they'll never retreat again. But it does mean something within them is shifting, something within them is opening. So don't dismiss the subtlety. Don't miss the power because you expected fireworks. In fact, the very fact that it feels understated is what makes it genuine. They're not performing. They're not rehearsing a script. They're simply stretching into territory that scares them. And that stretch in itself is the truest measure of sincerity. Because at the end of the day, what matters most is not whether their apology meets some external standard of expression. What matters is that they found the courage to break their own pattern, to step across the line of safety and into the territory of connection. That is the real meaning behind, I'm sorry. And if you can hear that meaning beneath the words, you'll realize the apology is not small at all. It's everything. When an avoidant finally steps forward with an apology, the instinct for many of us is to grab onto it, dissect it, and almost squeeze it for more than it's ready to give. We want answers, we want assurance, we want promises of change. And that makes sense. We've probably been waiting a long time for that moment. But here's the truth, the way you respond in that moment can either open the door wider for growth or shut it completely. Because for the avoidant, the apology itself was already a massive leap into discomfort. If your reaction feels like interrogation, they're likely to retreat. And that fragile bridge they just attempted to build might collapse under the weight of your demands. So what does it mean to respond without pressure? It means you acknowledge the courage it took for them to show up in that way. It means you accept the apology as a gesture of connection rather than a contract of perfection. You don't have to minimize your pain or sweep the issue under the rug. But you also don't want to crush the very seed of vulnerability that just started to sprout. Think about it like this. If someone plants a delicate seed in your hand, you don't smash it open to check if it's real. You nurture it, you give it space to grow. The same principle applies here. Now, that doesn't mean you silence yourself. It doesn't mean you tolerate repeated cycles of hurt. What it does mean is that you hold your ground in a way that communicates strength without punishment. You can say, I appreciate you saying that, and then let silence do the rest. That silence is powerful. It lets the apology breathe. It gives them the space to sit in their vulnerability without being immediately pushed back into defensiveness. And paradoxically, when you create that kind of environment, you increase the likelihood that they'll return with even more openness next time. Remember, avoidants don't apologize easily because vulnerability feels like stepping into enemy territory. So if your reaction confirms that territory is hostile, judgmental, demanding, unforgiving, they'll retreat. But if your reaction confirms it's safe, calm, present, receptive, they'll slowly learn that intimacy isn't as dangerous as their nervous system once believed. This is how change begins, not in grand moments, but in small, repeated experiences of safety. It's about restraint, but not passivity. It's about demonstrating that you can hold two truths at once: a yes, I was hurt, and yes, I see your effort. That balance is incredibly powerful because it shows that you value growth over punishment. You're not excusing the past, but you're also not chaining them to it. And in doing that, you become a catalyst for trust. And let's not forget, how you respond is not only about them. It's about you reclaiming your own power. Because when you resist the urge to pressure or demand, you're declaring that your peace isn't dependent on dragging out a confession. You're showing that you can stand firm, rooted, steady, regardless of whether someone else gives you every detail you crave. That's strength. That's maturity. That's leadership in a relationship. So when the apology comes, ask yourself, am I going to meet this with pressure or am I going to meet it with presence? Pressure pushes people back into hiding. Presence invites them forward into connection. And that choice is always in your hands. Because in the end, the way you respond determines whether their apology becomes just a moment or the beginning of true transformation. When an avoidant says, I'm sorry, it's easy to treat it like the finish line. You've been waiting, you've been longing, and finally the words came. But here's the truth, that moment is not the end. It's the beginning. An apology from an avoidant is an opening, an invitation, a doorway to something greater. And if you see it that way, if you choose to treat it as the seed of transformation rather than the completion of it, then you can turn that fragile moment into the foundation of something stronger than you've ever had before. Think about what's really happening in that moment. This person, who has spent most of their life building walls, has cracked them open. That apology isn't just about regret. It's about testing whether connection is safe. It's a risk, a trial run into a territory they've always avoided. And here's the key. You get to decide whether that moment remains isolated or becomes the start of a pattern. Because every time they take that risk, every time they lean into accountability instead of avoidance, they are rewriting their story. They are proving to themselves that intimacy doesn't have to mean danger, that closeness doesn't always end in pain. Now, here's where your role becomes crucial. If you see their apology as the end, you'll miss the chance to build on it. But if you treat it as the beginning, you create a pathway for growth. That doesn't mean you rescue them, and it doesn't mean you carry the weight of their transformation. It means you honor the effort without demanding perfection. You allow that "I'm sorry" to become a stepping stone toward more openness, more accountability, more connection. For the avoidant, change doesn't happen in sweeping gestures. It happens in increments. It happens in those small but profound moments where they step into the discomfort of intimacy and discover they survived it. Your response can reinforce that discovery. By showing that their apology is received, valued, and respected, you encourage them to take that step again. And over time, those small moments accumulate into transformation. But let's be clear, transformation doesn't just mean they grow. It also means you grow. It means you use their apology as a mirror to ask yourself, what do I want to create here? What boundaries do I need? What standard of connection am I willing to hold? Because if you approach that apology with clarity about what you deserve and clarity about what you will no longer accept, you shift the dynamic. You're no longer waiting for their growth to validate your worth. You're partnering in growth while standing firmly in your own strength. That's the beauty of this moment. It isn't just about reconciliation. It's about elevation. The apology can be the spark that ignites a higher level of honesty, a deeper level of intimacy, a stronger level of mutual respect. And yes, it's fragile. Yes, it takes patience. But fragility doesn't mean weakness. It means potential. It means possibility. So when an avoidant apologizes, don't see it as the closing of a chapter. See it as the opening of one. Recognize it as a moment that can alter the trajectory of the relationship if both people are willing to step forward. Because the truth is, transformation doesn't happen when people stay in their patterns. Transformation happens the moment someone dares to break them.